Hi guys,
Hey guys, I am Marcela.
and I'm Shantini, and today we will be talking about criticality towards educational technology and more specifically, if criticality is contradictory to innovation. So Selwyn, for one, in his 2015 article notes what he calls a modest renaissance of critical analysis of technology and education. But what does such analysis really entail? And how do they relate to innovation? In this field of education and technology, where hype about what might and could be far outstrips the realities, we argue for an urgent need to unpack these questions.
Exactly. So, what we are arguing here is that not only criticality isn't contradictory to innovation, but it is actually necessary to innovation, particularly if we are searching for innovation towards social justice, right?
Yeah.
So, otherwise, we are at risk of acting out of these unrealistic hopes that technology will solve complex, non technological issues, which is the famous tech fix, and fall into cycles of tech amnesia, repeating past solutions with just these minor alterations and a strong marketing discourse, and calling that innovation.
Mhm.
So, we will support our arguments with three pillars. The first one is what it means to be critical. Then we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be innovative in edtech. And finally, we'll discuss an example where criticality has supported innovation. So, shall we do it?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's go. So, what does it mean to be critical? I really like the framework that was provided by McGilchrist in 2021 when she talks about transformation, stability, and speculation. Transformation is analyzing how do these emerging trends transform their surroundings. What are they changing? What are the social and political implications? And what sort of individualities or socialities are being produced when you use this tech?
Yeah.
Then we have stability, and then stability is talking mostly about what we maintain. So, in what ways is tech maintaining pre existing inequalities, but also what other forms of inequalities they create, right? Because every time
Yeah.
we insert a new tech, we are also creating new forms of relationships and interactions. And finally, we have speculation, which for me is the most hopeful one, which is critiquing contemporary education and society by imagining other futures. Instead of thinking of technology as this inevitable future that is fixed, we are thinking about what is possible, what potential or even preferable futures that we might have, and how to achieve it.
Yeah, and I think this framework by McGill-Chris is also, we can draw some parallels between this framework as well as that which is proposed by Selwyn in 2015. So Selwyn in 2015 quotes Sonia Livingstone in outlining three main lines of critical inquiry for educational technology. So first, he talks about what is really going on. And this, I think, connects to stability, right?
Yes.
And this is essentially about looking at technology use in situ and refocusing conversations around what Selwyn in an earlier article in 2010 refers to as the state of the actual. It's about pushing back against the supposed inevitability of technological change, exposing the material and social cultural injustices that surround it. So, second, he highlights an attention to the question on how this can be explained. So, the how here connects to transformation, as we see. So, it's about looking beyond learning, as Gert Biester emphasizes, and making sense of technology in education by attending to the political and democratic dimensions of education that are too often overlooked in the relentless pursuit of questions about efficiency and effectiveness of technology in education. The last but definitely not the least question is how things could be otherwise. And this connects to what Marcela mentions, the most hopeful part of criticality, which is
Yes.
speculation. And this is about conceiving arrangements of technology and education that might advance social freedom and liberation from what has commonly been termed the matrix of domination. So, such endeavors of speculation necessitate speaking up for and on behalf of marginalized voices that are often forgotten in discussions about what technology and education is and should be about.
That's great. I think understanding criticality this way also helps us discuss a little bit of what innovation means in education.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays there is this damaging discourse that innovation actually means disruption, right?
Yeah.
So Weller, in his book 25 Years of EdTech from 2020, actually describes disruption as a complete systemic change that will overtake the field, which is a bit concerning to say the least,
Yes.
because surely not everything in the educational system should be thrown away, and that requires a critical look. We
Yep.
need to understand what are the things that are worth saving, as well as what are the practices that need some change or improvement, right?
Yeah.
And another thing that we have to consider when we talk about innovation is that it doesn't only have predictable outcomes. So every
Yeah.
time we bring in a new technology, we will, of course, have like the more expected or predictable consequences, but we also have a lot of unpredictable social, economic, and cultural consequences
Yeah.
or happenings that we need to take into account as
Exactly.
well.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea of the discourse of disruption not always being in the benefit of education is also echoed by Knox in 2021, where he warns that those who claim disruption actually have hidden agendas, be they political or ideological, and in fact, much of this discourse is in fact driven by the commoditization of education and seeing learning as a product. So, quoting Weller in 2020, technology is, in short, is developed and evaluated by people who like the technology but don't actually have an appreciation of the educational context, which is an absolute nightmare, which we should
Yeah,
avoid.
clearly bad.
So, in thinking about the limitations of disruptive innovation, is how we positioned it earlier. So, what might we move the conversation forward? What might be a more productive definition of innovation? So, situating the innovation in the context of education, Redding and colleagues offer actually a broader and potentially more useful definition of innovation as the application of an idea or invention adapted or refined for specific uses or in its particular context. So I think both of us agree that this definition of innovation is much more productive in bringing back the from the margins the different needs of different communities, as well as helping to pay attention and shine light on different social, cultural, and material circumstances in which technology is actually embedded in.
Yeah, definitely. And if we understand that innovation should always stem from attention to context, specific needs of specific groups of people, then we have to agree that criticality is necessary
For
to
sure.
innovation, right?
Yeah.
Especially if we want more just outcomes and if we are searching for technology that will help us reduce or address inequalities and marginalization in society. Because without that, we are very likely to keep repeating what Selwyn calls the cycle of hype, hope, and then
Mm-hmm.
disappointment when technology, of course, fails to address all of our high expectations.
Yeah.
So, Weller also makes a very good point when he uses the terms year zero mentality and edtech amnesia, which I very much appreciate because it addresses this myth of this individual genius creator that dismisses all kinds of pre-existing conditions or prior work on technology. And we can see that happening every time a new digital product comes out, right?
Yeah.
And even if it is a development of pre existing technologies, it is usually marketed as something completely new and unprecedented. And that actually makes our job really hard because it makes it harder to learn from past mistakes. We cannot trace back and understand what effects this technology has had in the field before, or even what improvements have actually to be made to have better outcomes this time.
Yeah. And I think this whole idea of the necessity of criticality to innovation can be can be further illustrated through an example, and specifically the example that we've chosen is really the manifesto for teaching online that was written by the Centre for Research in Digital Education at the University of Edinburgh in 2011 and then in 2016. So specifically, this example shows is testament to criticality in the way that it speculates preferable futures for digital learning. It not only speculates but materializes it in the context of higher education with ideas as such as how online can be the privileged mode, and in exercising criticality, they were then able to innovate the university's course. So they developed a whole course for the MSc in digital education pathway that was exclusively digital. It was born digital, it's not just adapted from an in-person class. So this criticality motivated the design of innovative features such as the virtual learning spaces that fostered rich interaction between participants located remotely across the globe. Underlying this innovative practice is an attention to the other lines of inquiry, namely what and how. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's really great. I think it makes so much sense to draw this connection
yeah,
between this virtual learning space and then the critical questions of what and how, as you said,
yeah,
because it makes it really concrete. What was before in theory, now we can see like the what that was happening behind the creation of this digital learning space was this environment where we had an overly positive, sometimes even delusional discourse of what technology could do for education. But at the same time, we still had this hierarchy that formal education would prioritize in person teaching and learning as a superior mode.
yeah,
So even though students could access online, they wouldn't feel like they were actively part of the university unless they were on campus, right?
yeah,
And we can also see their analysis of the how when they discuss how the digital environment can free people from the requirement of physical and temporal co-presence. But I like this very much. They are still aware that this shift also opens up other forms of exclusion,
exclusion.
right? So it's not naive or over optimistic, which sets the tone for the entire manifesto, but it is aware of the complexities of education.
Yeah, and so like what you just mentioned about how this is not naive or overly optimistic points towards the whole recursivity or iterative nature of innovation. That it's a continuous cycle of trial, feedback, and improvement, and it's about knowing where to look for the problems, seeing these problems surface, and then rectifying them, right, and addressing them for more socially just outcomes, and which tends to always come, which tends more often than not to come from a more participatory approach towards design of technology and from more community engagement. So, drawing a conclusion about the relationship between criticality towards education and technology and innovation, so we both posit that criticality is the lens that reviews the problems, the systemic issues, inequalities, and injustices represented in stakeholders' experiences with educational technology. And innovation is what allows us to address or alleviate some of those issues. Latour in 2004 proposes a very useful quote to help conceptualize the whole idea of criticality, and one we find particularly resonates with us, and that is that the critic is not the one who debunks, but the one who assembles. So criticality is not just about critiquing, is not just about fault finding, but more importantly, it's about finding solutions, and that creates a whole productive exercise that helps us hopefully achieve more socially just outcomes.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.